They came back from Shanghai glowing, newlyweds flush with adventure, laughter still caught in their throats as they walked the winding path to the house perched on the hill. It was the house they believed they had sold. The house they believed they owned. The key in Aaron's hand turned smoothly in the lock, the click of metal on metal reassuring, final. Before I tell you what was behind that door, and why my daughter screamed like a child lost in the dark, like, subscribe and share this story. Some legacies are worth protecting. Some betrayals demand to be heard. Until the door opened. Until the air inside hit them like a cold slap. Until Maria screamed. It wasn't the shriek of surprise. It wasn't even fear. It was the deep, guttural sound of something far more primal, of grief, of betrayal, of uncomprehending loss. I hadn't heard that sound from my daughter since she was 8 years old and tumbled from the swing in our backyard, scraped palms and all the breath knocked out of her. But this wasn't a cry for help. This was the sound of something breaking. And they weren't screaming because of what they saw. They were screaming because of what they didn't. Everything, absolutely everything they expected to find, was gone. And before I tell you what they found in the hollow shell of that house, I want you to know this. I orchestrated every moment. From my armchair. With a pen and a phone. That scream, it was the final note in a symphony that had played softly, insidiously, through the walls of that house for nearly 2 years. A symphony of whispers. It began the day after Evelyn died. 50 years we had together. Half a century of laughter, fights, birthdays, and quiet mornings with toast and jam. And then just silence. Not peace. Not calm. Just a yawning, unbearable silence. The house, once filled with warmth, turned cold. Her absence lingered in the corners like a shadow that wouldn't lift. So when Maria and Aaron suggested moving in to help care for me, part of me welcomed it. I was grieving. I was tired. And truth be told, I was afraid of that silence. I mistook their offer for love. I mistook their presence for comfort. It didn't take long for the siege to begin. It started with the curtains. Dad, these floral ones are so dated, Maria said, scrolling through her phone. I found some gorgeous minimalist ones. Clean modern. They'll brighten up the kitchen. Before I could answer, the new ones were ordered. She didn't know, or didn't care, that Evelyn chose those floral curtains to make the room feel like spring. It was the first thing they erased. The second thing they erased was my chair. Not just any chair, my chair. Worn leather, cracked at the edges, creased in all the right places. It fit me like a glove after decades of use, molded to the shape of my back, my legs, my life. One afternoon I walked into the living room and it was gone. Moved it to the basement, Aaron said casually, sipping from a glass of water like he'd done me a favor. It just didn't go with the flow of the room. We're trying to make it more open. He clapped a hand on my shoulder. You understand, right? I nodded. But inside, something small splintered. The house didn't feel like mine anymore. It didn't feel like ours. It felt like a hotel, sterile and temporary, a place where I was tolerated. Where my preferences were politely ignored. And Maria, she had started to change. My daughter, once so bold, so bright, now hesitated before speaking. She would glance at Aaron before finishing her sentences. Sometimes she didn't finish them at all. Her voice would trail off into a quiet, uneasy smile. They were a team. I wasn't part of it. I was the project. The problem to be managed. The whispers became louder at night, Aaron's voice drifting from the porch while he paced on his phone. It's prime property. The neighborhood's trending up. It's just sitting there, all that equity. He never once called it a home. Never said the word family. To him, it was an investment. A portfolio. My life's work reduced to a Zillow listing. Then the suggestions started. I was in the garden that morning, kneeling in the soil where Evelyn's roses used to bloom, my fingers deep in the earth, turning the dirt, feeling her there with me. Aaron strolled out, tablet in hand. Jed, you really shouldn't be out here alone. What if you fall? No one would know. His voice was laced with concern. But his eyes were on the yard, not me, measuring the square footage. A few weeks later, he stopped me at the door as I grabbed my keys. Where you headed? Breakfast with the guys, I said. He smiled. You know, I read that drivers over 70 have slower reaction times. It's scary. Let me hold on to these. I'll drive you when you need. He extended his hand. It wasn't a suggestion. I looked at Maria. She wouldn't meet my eyes. I handed him the keys. Not because I agreed. Not because I was convinced. But because I didn't want to fight. I didn't want the tension, the sideways glances, the late-night arguments behind closed doors. I thought I was keeping the peace. Now I understand. Peace without boundaries is just surrender in slow motion. From that moment on, the walls of my own home began to close in. I was a ghost in a house I had built with my own hands. At dinner, Aaron would scroll through real estate listings on his phone, casually tossing numbers into the air like confetti. Henderson's place down the street? Sold for 3.2. This neighborhood's blowing up. Jed, you're sitting on a gold mine. He said it with a grin like he was sharing good news. I nodded silently and ate my food, tasteless in my mouth. Each remark wasn't just a comment, it was an eraser slowly rubbing out the man I had been, turning me into someone fragile, someone dependent. And Maria? She didn't stop him. She didn't speak up. She just smiled, that same hesitant smile, biting her lip, staring at her plate, pretending not to notice the man she called Dad fading right in front of her. Some nights, after they'd gone to bed, I would wander the house alone. I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't need to. I knew every board, every squeak in the floor. My fingers would trail the oak banister on the stairs, the one I sanded and stained with Evelyn on a summer weekend long ago. In the hallway between the kitchen and the den, I'd pause. The wall was bare now, freshly painted, but in the right light, if I tilted my head just so, I could still see them, those faint pencil marks where we measured Maria's height year after year. She grew 2 inches the summer she turned 12. That house wasn't built from lumber and drywall. It was built from overtime pay and sacrifice. From whispered dreams and late-night laughter. I had promised Evelyn back when we were kids with nothing, that I would build her a castle. A place no storm could touch. A place our family could always return to. And now, it was being treated like a commodity. They saw value in the floors, the windows, the roof. But not in the story it held. Not in the woman it honored. Not in the man it made of me. It was in those quiet, midnight hours, when only the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional groan of old pipes kept me company, that I came to understand what I was truly fighting for. Not a house. Not square footage or market value. A promise. The promise I made to Evelyn the day we broke ground with nothing but a borrowed shovel and a heart full of foolish ambition. I'll build you a place no one can take from you, I'd said. A place where our children will be safe. A home we'll grow old in. Now that promise was cracking under the pressure of polite manipulation and silent betrayals. Aaron saw a spreadsheet. Maria saw a clean slate. But I saw every brick as a memory. Every window as a snapshot of a life well lived. And I realized, if I let them win, I wouldn't just be losing a house. I'd be letting Evelyn disappear. I'd be letting me disappear. And so I made a decision in the stillness of my study, while her lavender-scented polish still lingered on the baseboards. They wanted to sell a building. But I was about to show them what it meant to protect a legacy. The final straw came quietly, cloaked in wine and fake concern. It was a Tuesday evening, ordinary in every way. We sat around the dinner table Evelyn had found at a thrift store and refinished with her own hands. Aaron had uncorked a bottle of wine too expensive for an ordinary night. That was always his tell. He took a long sip, cleared his throat and launched into the speech. Jed, he said, using my name like it gave him authority. Maria and I have been talking. We're worried about you. Really worried. He gestured vaguely around the room as if the walls themselves were a burden I could no longer carry. We think it's time to formalize things, just for your protection, of course. Power of attorney and new trust. I could manage it for you. That way you don't have to stress about any of this. Maria didn't speak. She didn't need to. She stared at her plate, pushing a piece of chicken around like a child told to eat her vegetables. She had already agreed. I set my silverware down gently. The clink was louder than his entire speech. I looked him in the eye, and I said one word, calm and absolute. No. The days after I said no passed quietly, too quietly. Then on a Thursday the silence broke. I was in my study, the late afternoon light stretching long shadows across the carpet. I was halfway through a book on urban design, something I used to read for joy, now for distraction, when my phone rang. Maria's face lit up the screen. A familiar cocktail of hope and dread stirred in my chest. Hey Dad, she chirped. Too bright. Too cheerful. Her voice was painted with radio host energy, the kind used to cover something broken beneath. Just checking in. How are you feeling today? I looked out the window toward the oak tree Evelyn and I planted on our first anniversary. Its leaves had just begun to blush gold. I'm fine, Maria. Just reading. Oh, that's great. Good, she said quickly as if she was checking boxes. Did you take your blood pressure meds? Did you eat lunch? Yes, I did. Perfect. Kevin's just walked in, so I've got to run. Love you, Dad. The line went silent. But the call didn't end. I was still holding the phone when I heard his voice. Flat. Clinical. Is he off? Pause. Good. Let's talk. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just sat there with the phone pressed to my ear, heart pounding like a hammer inside a hollow chest. Kevin's voice came through crisp and casual, like he was reviewing numbers, not discussing a life. Look, honey, I know it's hard, he said, his tone smooth, rehearsed. But you heard him. He's just going through the motions. He sounds tired. Did he even ask you anything about yourself? Maria's voice, barely a whisper, threaded in. He didn't have a chance. I was in a rush. That's not the point, Kevin said. He was patient now, like a tutor explaining arithmetic to a child. The point is, we can't keep doing this. You're stressed. I'm stressed. And for what? So he can shuffle around that old mausoleum forgetting whether he's taken his pills? And then she said it. Quiet. Almost not there. A nursing home. Like it hurt to even speak the words. It feels so cruel. Kevin didn't miss a beat. It's not cruel. It's practical. Sunnyside Meadows is top-rated. Nurses, activities, people his age. He'll be fine. And let's be honest. Pause. Then the blow. We're sitting on a $3 million asset. Kevin's voice was steady, almost gentle. We can't start our lives, invest, travel, hell, breathe, until we unlock that value. It's time, Maria. He goes to the home. We sell the house. Use a sliver of it to fund his care. The rest, we live. It's the only logical solution. The right thing for everyone. There was a long pause on the line. I could hear Maria breathing. A tremble in. A shudder out. Then the sound I'd never forget. The quiet, pitiful surrender of a daughter who'd once promised her dying mother she'd take care of her father. Okay, she whispered. Okay, Kevin. A click. The line went dead. But the silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was thunder. I sat frozen in that room, the phone still warm in my hand, as if it too couldn't believe what it had just heard. The air around me thickened, heavy with truth. It wasn't the betrayal that hit first. It was the cold. A slow, creeping cold that sank through skin and bone and memory. She had agreed. She had agreed to get rid of me. Like old furniture too worn for the new house. Like a burden finally set down. My legs barely held me as I lowered myself into the armchair by the window, the one they called an eyesore. The world beyond the glass had gone blurry, the city reduced to a smear of light and movement. I turned my gaze to the mantel. There she was. Evelyn. Captured in a photograph from our 50th anniversary. Her smile still bright, her eyes still holding the spark that had pulled me across 5 decades of storms and sunrises. That picture had been my anchor. But as I looked at her now, another memory flooded in, one I had buried deep. The hospital. Sterile white walls. The smell of antiseptic and dying hope. Maria had been holding her mother's hand, tears streaking her cheeks. Evelyn, with barely a whisper left in her, turned to our daughter. Take care of your father, baby girl, she said. He's a strong man. But he's going to need you. Maria had nodded, crying harder. I will, Mama. I promise. That promise echoed in my ears now, cruel and hollow. A lie delivered with love. Or maybe just weakness. Either way, I had trusted it. And now, I understood. If I wanted to keep Evelyn's memory alive, I'd have to do it myself. Grief sat in my chest like a stone, but not a dead one. It pulsed. It hardened. It became a foundation. Not for bitterness. Not for revenge. For resolve. I had built homes from blueprints and ruins alike. I knew how to spot rot beneath fresh paint. I knew how to tear out mold without destroying the walls. That same instinct kicked in now. I wasn't just a father who'd been betrayed. I was Jeremiah Wallace, builder, husband, soldier, creator of the life they now wanted to liquidate. They had mistaken silence for weakness. They'd forgotten that before I ever held a cane, I held a hammer. And I was ready to build again. I looked down at my phone, not with dread this time but clarity. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I hadn't touched in over a year. Marcus Thorne. I didn't call him. Not yet. I just let my finger rest on his name, like an old general fingering the edge of a battle map. Marcus wasn't just a lawyer. He was my friend of 55 years. And I didn't need an attorney. I needed a war planner. And the old man they thought was fading? He was wide awake. I woke before sunrise the next morning. The grief was still there, but it had changed. No longer a fog, now a sharpening stone. I felt the edge of my mind growing keener against it. If they wanted a frail old man, I would give them one. If they were building a case to steal my life, I would be their best witness. After all, I spent my life constructing things built to last. Now I would construct a fiction, an illusion of decline, one careful crack at a time. At breakfast I let the act begin. My hand trembled as I reached for the coffee. When I lifted the spoon I let it slip, clattering onto the floor. Maria flinched. "Dad, please be careful." Aaron didn't even look up from his tablet. But he smirked. I looked at the spoon like it was a foreign object. "Silly me," I mumbled, shrinking into my chair. "It just slipped." Aaron gave Maria a knowing glance. They saw deterioration. I was laying bricks. Later I stood next to Aaron on the back deck, staring up at a clear blue sky. "Looks like rain," I muttered, squinting. He looked at me sideways. "Forecast says sunshine all week." I blinked slowly. Right, guess I forgot. Every detail mattered now. I began to plant little seeds in their minds, harmless-looking things that, when gathered, would tell the story they wanted to believe. The story they needed to believe. Confusion. Forgetfulness. Fatigue. I played the part of the old man they feared I was. When Aaron handed me the water bill one afternoon, I turned it over in my hands like it was a riddle. "What's this for again?" I asked, eyes narrowing. He pulled up a chair, his tone soaked in condescension. "It's the water bill, Jed," he said slowly. "You know, the showers, the sinks. The water we use." He pointed to the total as if I'd never seen numbers before. I nodded blankly, letting the silence grow. "Right," I whispered. I must have forgotten. Inside I was taking notes, mental blueprints of their reactions, their comfort, their growing confidence. In the evenings I'd let a book fall from my lap and drift off in the armchair. Not really asleep. Just watching. "He didn't even make it through the first chapter," Aaron whispered to Maria one night. "He's exhausted. We're doing the right thing." And she, my daughter, nodded. Each lie they told themselves became another nail in the coffin they were building. They just didn't know. It wasn't mine. The next morning I told them I wasn't feeling well. "Just going to rest in my room," I said, clutching the banister like it was holding me up. Aaron nodded approvingly. "Good idea. Take it easy today." The front door closed behind them minutes later, car doors slammed, and the engine faded into the distance. The moment they were gone I grabbed my coat. I walked 2 miles in the early autumn chill, wind biting at my cheeks. My knees ached. My lungs burned. But I kept going. At a corner store that smelled of dust and burnt coffee, I paid cash for a prepaid phone. No names. No trace. I found a quiet alley behind the building and pressed the only number that mattered. "Thorne?" came the voice on the other end. "Marcus," I said. "It's time." There was a pause. Then, "Where?" "Same place as always. Booth in the back." He was already there when I arrived. The coffee shop hadn't changed, greasy booths, strong coffee, chipped mugs. Marcus stood, suit sharp as ever. He hadn't aged a day in the places that mattered. "Jed Wallace," he said, embracing me. "What the hell have they done to you?" I slid into the booth. And I began to tell him everything. I told Marcus everything. From the curtains to the chair. From the whispers to the stolen car keys. From the help that turned into control and finally, to the call I was never supposed to hear. His jaw clenched tighter with each word. By the time I repeated Kevin's speech about unlocking value and nursing homes, Marcus's eyes had turned ice cold. He didn't say "I'm sorry." He didn't offer pity. He offered strategy. "That slick son of a bitch," he muttered. "Told you I didn't like him. But Jed, you've still got the upper hand. You just don't know it yet." He pulled out a leather-bound notepad and clicked his pen. "Let's start with the basics. The house, who holds the title?" I leaned forward. "There's a trust," I said. "The Wallace family trust. Lena and I set it up 20 years ago. Everything went into it. The house. The land. Everything." Marcus looked up slowly. And then he smiled. Not a warm smile. The kind of smile a seasoned predator makes when he realizes the prey walked right into the trap. "Oh, there's a trust?" he said softly. He pushed the sugar packet toward me on the table. "Then, my friend, they're playing checkers." He tapped his pen once. "And we're about to teach them chess." Marcus leaned in, folding his hands like a professor preparing to deliver a brutal but elegant lesson. "Here's what Kevin didn't understand," he said, sliding the sugar packet back toward himself. "Most people keep their house in their pocket. Easy to steal. You and Lena? You locked yours in a steel box. That box is the trust." He set his coffee mug over the sugar packet. "When Lena passed, her trustee rights transferred to you. That means you and only you hold the key. Not Maria. Not Kevin. Just you." I felt Evelyn beside me in that moment, heard her voice again from those long nights drafting the trust. "Belt and suspenders, Jed. Always be prepared." She had been. We had been. Marcus's eyes gleamed now. Maria's listed as a beneficiary. That means she might benefit, if you allow it. But she has no control. No claim. Kevin saw her name and got greedy. Thought it meant ownership. He leaned back. It doesn't. I nodded, the weight of it settling in. They've already drawn up fake sale papers, I told him. Probably to a shell company Kevin set up himself. Marcus smiled wider. Then we'll beat them at their own game. You sell the real house, while they sell a ghost. What followed was a strange, silent performance. Inside the house, Maria and Kevin were stars in a play of their own making, laughing over fake closing documents, dreaming of fast cars and first-class flights. Their lives were a fantasy built on fiction. Meanwhile, Marcus and I worked in the real world. We met not in kitchens filled with deceit, but in a wood-paneled boardroom downtown. The walls were lined with framed photos of builders and dreamers, people who, like me, had poured their lives into something lasting. Across the table sat Eleanor Du Bois, director of the West Side Community Heritage Trust. A retired professor, her eyes were sharp and kind, the kind that didn't just look at you, but saw you. We don't want to flip your house, Mr. Wallace, she said. We want to preserve it. What you and your wife built is a cornerstone of this neighborhood's history. We'd like to nominate it as a protected landmark. And we'd like to create a scholarship in Evelyn's name, for young architects from this community. I didn't cry, but I felt something shift in my chest. They saw a building worth millions. Eleanor saw a legacy. And I knew without a doubt, exactly who deserved it. They returned from China with stars in their eyes, still drunk on the illusion of victory. I imagined the taxi ride, Maria leaning against the window, humming with anticipation, Kevin texting lawyers and checking account balances, smug satisfaction blooming on his face. Their future was waiting at the top of the hill. They didn't know the house had already been emptied. Didn't know the West Side Community Heritage Trust now held the title. Didn't know the keys in Kevin's hand opened nothing but a memory. They walked up the familiar stone path. Kevin slid the key into the lock, turned it, and smiled. The door swung open. Into silence. No furniture. No warmth. No signs of life. Just pale rectangles on the walls where photographs once hung. Just dust motes swirling in empty sunlight. And on the floor, a single white envelope. Maria picked it up with trembling fingers. Inside, one page. The sale date. The buyer, West Side Community Heritage Trust. Storage details for their belongings. And the final line written in my hand. This key will cease to function at midnight. This was never your house to sell. It was my wife's legacy to protect. Their screams never reached me. But their silence? That was enough. I had kept my promise.